Adolf Hitler said as he was dying, "My spirit will rise from the grave and the world will see I was right." And you know what? While I was researching this documentary, I came across hundreds of reels on Instagram whose comment sections shocked me. Almost every second person is ready to believe that Hitler was absolutely right and that he was far ahead of his time. But on the other hand, you will find articles, blogs, and YouTube videos from all over the world that have clearly declared Hitler evil. So now the question here is, what is the actual truth? Was Hitler truly a devil or a great man? Or is there some other side to the story that has been intentionally hidden from us? Hitler, good guy, bad guy? I'm going to say, I'm neutral. Neutral? You are saying that Hitler was not a bad guy? Whenever we hear Hitler's name, only these three things come to mind. That this one person, Hitler, killed millions of people in a way so torturous that such a dreadful punishment probably doesn't even exist in hell. World War II. If it hadn't been for Hitler, World War II would never have happened. The third thing that comes to mind when we hear Hitler's name is anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism means hating Jews, whose religion is primarily followed by Israeli people based on their culture and religion. And whenever the word anti-Semitism is heard, Hitler's face automatically comes to mind because it was due to this that Hitler killed 6 million Jews, identifying them by their identity. But now the question arises, can one single person truly kill millions of people? Can one single person orchestrate the Holocaust of 6 million Jews of a single religion? Can one single person instigate a world war? Well, how much of this is true and how much is false, you will find out by the end of this documentary. And yes, this documentary about Adolf Hitler is one that YouTube might even delete. Before YouTube removes it, watch it until the end and share it with everyone. Now, let's get started. Hitler. 78 years, 6 million deaths. His country. Human beings have something of value they bring to the table. July 28, 1914. This was the day World War I began. The whole world was divided into two parts, the Allies and the Central Powers. And this war ran non-stop for the next 4 years, until 1918, in which more than 20 million people died. Germany was one of the countries in the Central Powers alliance in this war. Many people don't know that Hitler was also involved in World War I, but as a courier boy. During World War I, Hitler's job was to transfer messages between the German army and the headquarters. One specific reason this job was assigned to Hitler was that whenever he delivered a message, the people who received it praised him highly. But one day, while doing this job, something happened that changed Hitler's life forever. 1918 was the final phase of World War I. During this time, Hitler was stationed in a small village in France, and at that moment a massive attack took place in which he was severely wounded. He couldn't see anything with one eye, due to which he started running in the wrong direction. And suddenly, a British soldier stood in front of him, Henry Tandy. By all accounts, Henry was no ordinary soldier. He was a highly trained and skilled soldier. But when he saw that Hitler was already badly wounded and completely unarmed, he had no weapon. Henry, despite being a soldier of the enemy country, lowered his gun and let Hitler live. But how was Henry to know that the person he was sparing as an innocent today would go on to behead millions of innocents later? After escaping Henry's bullet, Hitler somehow reached a German hospital. His condition was so bad that a gas attack had temporarily blinded one of his eyes, and his left shoulder was so badly injured that his hand trembled for the rest of his life. While admitted to the hospital, he learned a piece of news that made him literally weep. World War I was officially over, and Germany had surrendered. As soon as Hitler learned this, he wept right there on the hospital bed. This defeat was so costly for Germany that it caused its economy and army to collapse, and on the other hand, the morale of its citizens was completely shattered.
In exchange for this defeat, Germany was forced to sign a treaty called the Treaty of Versailles. This treaty is one of the biggest reasons behind Hitler becoming a dictator. I have explained it in depth later. But for now, you can roughly understand that this treaty was an agreement that imposed very strict economic and military restrictions on Germany, which made Germany's situation go from bad to worse. This treaty also caused hyperinflation in Germany, due to which people had to carry suitcases full of money just to buy a loaf of bread. All this made the people extremely frustrated, especially with the government. At that time, Germany was governed by the Weimar Republic government system. Germans started blaming their government for the state Germany was in because of the Treaty of Versailles. They felt their current government was completely corrupt and incompetent, which is why they lost the war and why they had to sign such humiliating treaties. In the midst of this instability and outrage, Adolf enters the story.
Hitler's rise to power. Look, Hitler was a former soldier who had wholeheartedly supported his country in a war situation. And he was also a charismatic speaker who could easily manipulate anyone with his speeches. Furthermore, the German people were frustrated and angry with the current government. So all the stars aligned in Hitler's favor. The Germans found a new leader in Hitler, and in no time, Hitler went from an ordinary leader to the dictator of Germany, which was a democracy. So now the question is, how did Hitler go from being an ordinary soldier to a dictator? In 1920, a leader named Anton Drexler formed a party called the National Socialist German Workers' Party. But later when Hitler entered politics, he repackaged this party and gave it the name the Nazi Party. Under this party, Hitler launched his manifesto, which he called the 25-point program. In this manifesto, Hitler broadly promised that he would pull Germany out of unemployment and cancel all the humiliating peace treaties imposed on Germany after World War I. But in the same manifesto, he also mentioned that only those whose veins contained pure German blood would be allowed to remain in Germany. Meaning, all immigrants other than the proper German race would be expelled from Germany. The most controversial promise in this manifesto was to blame the people of the Jewish religion for the poor state of Germany. Why blame the Jews? There is a whole chapter on this later in the documentary. But for now, understand that through his 25-point manifesto, Hitler promised the German people, "I will make Germany great again." And this promise of Hitler won the hearts of the people. Meanwhile, in 1923, Hitler committed a major act, and for that, he was thrown into jail. He staged a revolt to overthrow the current government, which is called the Beer Hall Putsch or Munich Putsch. But his attempt failed and he was jailed. While sitting in jail, he wrote his most famous book, Mein Kampf, which means My Struggle. In this book, he wrote about his ideology and his future plan. After being released from jail, he reorganized his scattered party and participated in the election. But then came 1929, the year of the Great Depression. Germany's economy was already weak and now the Great Depression had arrived, making its bad situation even worse. Hitler took full advantage of this. Through his speeches, he portrayed the Nazi Party as the only one that could lift Germany out of poverty. The problem was that someone else's government was in power in Germany at that time, and the chancellor was someone else. Just as we have a prime minister, Germany has a chancellor. So for Hitler to come to power, he first needed to become the chancellor of Germany. By 1932, Hitler had significantly increased his seat share in the parliament and reached a prominent position. But he still didn't have a majority. So the power was still in someone else's hands. Paul von Hindenburg was the president of Germany at that time. In 1932, he made a minister named Franz von Papen the Chancellor of Germany.
But it was this von Papen who, driven by his revenge and anger, made a decision that mistakenly made Hitler the dictator of Germany. What happened was that before von Papen, a minister named Brüning was the Chancellor of Germany. But he couldn't improve Germany's deteriorating situation, so he was removed and von Papen was made Chancellor. But von Papen wasn't doing a great job either, and because of this, President Hindenburg removed him too and made von Schleicher the new Chancellor. Von Schleicher, along with von Papen and his other members, made plans to completely destroy Hitler's Nazi party. But we all know, in politics, has anyone ever been truly loyal to anyone else? Where the game of power comes in, there is no party. Only one's own seat matters. And von Papen was crazy for this seat. He thought that if he could somehow gain support and achieve a majority, no one could stop him from becoming chancellor. And at that time, he had only one option: Hitler. Von Papen secretly conducted some meetings with Hitler and told him everything. How von Papen was holding secret meetings behind closed doors to eliminate the Nazi party. And then he gave Hitler an offer. Join me. I will personally go and talk to Hindenburg and make you the Chancellor of Germany, and in return, I only want the seat of Vice-Chancellor. Von Papen's motive behind all this was that he and Hindenburg would make Hitler a puppet chancellor, and the real power would indirectly remain in their hands. Moreover, no chancellor appointed by Hindenburg was properly fulfilling his responsibilities. Therefore, they needed a new face, and he knew that at least at that moment, he couldn't find anyone better than Hitler. They hated Hitler only for his extremist ideology, but they thought, we will just use Hitler like a puppet, so he will automatically remain under our control. But von Papen and Hindenburg were both unaware that the person with whom they were playing this game of manipulation had already earned a PhD in manipulation. Hitler accepted von Papen's condition without any negotiation. He would be the chancellor and von Papen would be the vice-chancellor. Finally, on January 30th, 1933, Hitler was made the chancellor of Germany and von Papen was made the vice-chancellor. Hindenburg and von Papen thought they would control Hitler, but in just 1 month, Hitler flipped the entire game. On February 27, 1933, just 1 month after Hitler became chancellor, a huge fire broke out in the German parliament, the Reichstag. Hitler immediately blamed his opponents for this incident and immediately took emergency powers into his own hands, passing the Enabling Act. This was a law that gave him the power to create new laws without any permission from parliament. This act was nothing less than a license for dictatorship. Using this act, Hitler systematically eliminated all his opponents, including von Papen. Later in 1934, Hindenburg died. Immediately after that, Hitler declared himself the Führer, which means the supreme leader, or you could say the dictator of Germany. Thus, Germany, which was once a democracy, now flew the flag of dictatorship. Was Hitler truly evil? So we now come to the part of this documentary that will make you think. At the beginning of this documentary, I discussed 3 things that come to mind when we hear Hitler's name. Hitler killed millions of people, World War II probably would never have happened without Hitler, anti-Semitism, hatred towards the Jewish community based on their religion and culture. If seen through the lens of mainstream media, these are the 3 main reasons that make Hitler the devil. The entire Hitler dynasty, so that the blame can be placed on the guilty man, years of and the deaths of millions of innocent persons.
The question of mass killings. First, let's decode the killings done by Hitler. Watch this carefully. I have written down some names and numbers here that will shock you. The first name on this list is Mao Zedong. This Chinese leader was the sole reason for the deaths of millions of people in just 2 to 3 years. Mao had a plan to transform China from an agricultural country to an industrial powerhouse. His plan was called the Great Leap Forward, but no one could have guessed how dangerous this plan would be. To execute this plan, he forcibly collectivized the farmers' lands, taking everyone's land under government control and forced people into labor. They were given unrealistic targets to grow grain and produce steel, which was absolutely impossible according to human capabilities. However, what happened was that, to save themselves, officers started submitting fake reports. Consequently, a massive famine, Great Famine, struck China between 1959 and 1961, 2 years, in which approximately 30 to 40 million people died of starvation alone. This famine is also called the world's largest man-made famine. The number of 30 to 40 million varies slightly from source to source, but no doubt the number was enormous. It is said that people were literally eating tree leaves and in some places even human bones were being consumed. The second name on this list is Joseph Stalin, the dictator of the USSR at that time, today's Russia. While Hitler in Germany was building concentration camps to kill people, Stalin in the USSR turned his entire country into a camp. In the 1930s, Stalin was afraid that someone might steal his seat of power, and what he did for this will make your soul tremble. In 1936, Stalin carried out the Great Purge, also known as the Great Terror in the USSR. So what was this Great Purge? It was the systematic killing of anyone who challenged Stalin or could have challenged him. Army officers, poets, writers and teachers were all either shot or sent to the Gulag. Do you know what the Gulags were? The Arctic and Siberia in the USSR were 2 locations where the average winter temperature was -40 degrees Celsius. Stalin built large labor camps in these 2 locations. People sent to the gulag, from children to the elderly, worked day and night in the cold for months without sweaters or enough food. They only returned as corpses. Not only that, but Stalin also created a man-made famine like Mao, in which millions of people died again. The famine Stalin created in 1932 and 33 is called the Holodomor. What he did was take all the grain from the farmers in Ukraine and send it to Moscow. As a result, 3 to 4 million people in Ukraine alone died solely of starvation. If you estimate the total of the gulags, purges and famines, Stalin alone killed more than 20 million people. And do you know what the fun part is? Stalin is the person who was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize twice. So now the question is, why does Hitler's name come to mind whenever there is talk of mass killings? Why not theirs? The reason is character assassination. But why would anyone assassinate Hitler's character? Look, the only difference between Hitler and these other dictators was that they presented their crimes as a cultural revolution or development. But Hitler openly admitted his crimes in his speeches. This Romanian, see, this made it very easy to target him. If you study World War II, you will see that the Allied powers also killed countless innocents through bombings and famines. But they whitewashed their crimes in such a way that they only did what they did to stop an evil. And for this they needed a centralized villain, which became Hitler. So if we sum this up in one line, it's all about how the one who wins the war writes history. And the one who writes history always portrays himself as the hero. And to show someone as a hero, you need a villain in the story. Otherwise, how would the hero look great? Hitler killed 6 million Jews. But what about Stalin's killing of millions of innocents? What about Mao's man-made famine, which caused the death of millions of people? So am I justifying Hitler's crimes with all this? No. Am I saying that what Hitler did was right? A big no. What Hitler did was undoubtedly wrong. But was what these people did right? So my point is that if the issue here is only mass killings and Hitler is hated for it, then Hitler does not even come in the top 3 or top 4 on the list of mass killers.
So what is the point here? The point is that the one who has control over all these sectors, from central banking to media and entertainment to oil, can easily control the whole world. Now let's come back to our question. What was Hitler's connection to all this? As I mentioned at the beginning, Hitler had fought with all his might on Germany's side in World War I. But later, he found out that Germany had lost the war. During that time, another topic of discussion in Germany was that the Jewish community in Germany had supported the enemy countries during World War I and betrayed their own country. Although many people deny this, it certainly became a topic of discussion at that time. Secondly, because Germany lost the war, their economy and overall situation had deteriorated completely. Thirdly, a small handful of the Jewish population controlled the majority of Germany's institutions. Fourthly, for those who don't know, let me tell you that Hitler was a very skilled artist who created paintings that people can only stare at in awe. But when he went to the University of Vienna to seek admission in 1908, he was denied admission. Call it a coincidence or whatever you want, but the professor who refused Hitler admission was a Jew. And fifthly, as I also mentioned, because of religious contradictions, there had always been a conflict between Christians and Jews. So what happened was that when Hitler entered politics later, he knew that to come to power, he had to seize an issue that would resonate with the masses. Since there was already hatred for Jews among Germans due to religious conflicts, there were also allegations against Jews during World War I, and Jews were also a tiny minority. So Hitler found this to be a strong issue to position himself as a politician. And he openly started spreading Jew hatred through his speeches. Later, due to this hatred, Hitler brutally killed 6 million of the Jewish population. However, according to many historians, the number of 6 million is denied. But what I feel is that whether it is 6,600,000 or 6,000, a crime is a crime. And now we return to the 3 things for which Hitler is hated. Our second point was anti-Semitism, hatred towards Jews. And it is for this that Hitler is hated all over the world. Even if you go through mainstream media narratives and history textbooks, it seems as if the word anti-Semitism was invented by Hitler. What Hitler did was turn that mindset into his weapon and show the world that if public sentiments are properly and wisely used as a tool, a normal soldier can also become a dictator. So now the question is, how right is it to hate only Hitler for anti-Semitism when this mindset had already been prevalent for thousands of years and which Hitler later weaponized? If the issue is only anti-Semitism, then it was pervasive in almost every country, from England to Spain to France to the Middle East. And a country is made up of people.
So when the people of these countries supported the hatred of Jews, only then was it possible to expel the Jews. So why was only Hitler's name associated with anti-Semitism and not anyone else's? The pattern behind assassinations. The pictures you see behind me have one thing in common. They have all either been assassinated or subjected to major attacks. And these are no ordinary people. They have been the presidents and leaders of major countries. John F. Kennedy, assassinated in 1963. Abraham Lincoln, assassinated in 1865. Gaddafi, the de facto leader of Libya, was assassinated in 2011. But the question is, who assassinated the leaders of such large countries? And most importantly, why? Look, factually, solid evidence is not available anywhere. Now, why it isn't available is a separate issue in itself. So here is the pattern we have observed behind all these assassinations. If you observe closely, you will notice a very shocking pattern here. All of them challenged private bankers in their governance. They essentially created their own new currency and ran their countries without any funding from private banks. And not only were they running them, but without taking a single loan, they were developing the country from every angle: GDP, employment, infrastructure. And let me tell you that in 1933, Hitler also did something similar. He closed down many central banks in Germany and created his own currency called Mifo bills. Using these bills, Germany reduced its unemployment from 30% to only 2% in 5 years, built top-notch infrastructure in the country, and its GDP also skyrocketed during that time. But as I said earlier, history is witness that anyone who has challenged the bankers or financial institutions has suffered a bad fate. And the rest is history. And many historians also believe that this was one of the reasons behind World War II.
Who was truly responsible for World War II? Now I will ask you a question, and whatever comes to your mind first, you tell me in the comments. And the answer should come quickly. Who was responsible for World War II? I bet that only one name would have come to the minds of 99% of the people. And that is Hitler. And the reason for this is very simple. Because we have been taught this in history textbooks since childhood. So if the global narrative is this, it is obvious that Hitler's name would be the first to come to mind. But have you ever asked yourself, can one single person instigate a world war? Can one single person be that powerful? Let's investigate this a little. Was Hitler truly the only one responsible for World War II, or has something been hidden from all of us? 1918. In this year, World War I ends. The Allied powers win, and these countries lose. Now, very humiliating and oppressive treaties are imposed on the countries that lost. For example, I mentioned a treaty at the beginning of this documentary, the Treaty of Versailles, which was imposed on Germany. Now, I will tell you why this treaty is so important to understand why the Second World War happened. The Treaty of Versailles was a peace treaty in name, but in reality, it was a peace treaty that broke Germany's back. Under this treaty, Germany was told that they had started the war, and for this they were guilty. Therefore, they would now have to pay compensation for everything. Such huge reparations were imposed on Germany that their gold reserves, their industries, their dignity, everything was ruined. Not only this, even their army and navy were disbanded, and even their borders were artificially redrawn. And the same humiliating and horrible treaties were also made with Austria and Hungary. Therefore, these people were just looking for a leader who could fix this downfall. And then Hitler enters. Whatever Hitler's purpose was, good or bad, the path he adopted, the genocides, the gas chambers, the Holocaust he carried out, that was definitely horrible. But was Hitler the only villain? The answer to this is also no. He was a shared evil. How? Look, no war of this magnitude is the work of a single person. Such wars happen when an entire system is involved in it. Do you know that companies like BMW and Porsche to IBM and Volkswagen supported Hitler directly or indirectly? IBM literally invented a technology that helped identify and kill Jewish people. So now the question is, are these people not equally responsible for the deaths of all those who died in World War II or the Holocaust? Besides this, there is one more thing about why Hitler is not solely evil, but a shared evil. But no one discusses, or it is discussed very little, that before attacking these countries, England had signed an agreement with Hitler called the Munich Agreement. According to this agreement, England gave Hitler a free hand to do whatever he wanted with the country of Czechoslovakia. We will not interfere in it.
This means that when it comes to others, their morals and ethics are suppressed in a corner. But when the same villain, whom they themselves once gave a free pass to, turns around and attacks them, he becomes evil. So again, wasn't England also equally responsible for instigating World War II? Now, besides this, there is another important thing. While Hitler was attacking other countries and expanding Germany's territories, Japan was creating terror in China and Korea for expanding its own empire in Asia. From this side, Italy was invading Africa. And the Soviet Union had even signed an agreement with Germany called the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. And it was not just here. Such different blunders were happening in different places all over the world. So if you put all these events, the actions of different countries, and everyone's psychology on one page and observe them closely, you will realize that World War I happened not because of one person, but because of the collective mistakes of the whole world, especially Europe. Because the atmosphere all over the world was such that it only needed a spark. And that spark was made into Hitler. Look, nothing is completely black or completely white. In reality, it is grey. Again, I will repeat that no doubt Hitler was a villain, but he was not the only one. Other characters were standing on the stage in this drama, but the spotlight was only on Hitler's head. Why? Because he lost. And the winner decides whether to portray the loser as good, bad, right or wrong. What was my purpose behind making this documentary? Was my purpose to justify Hitler's actions? No. Was my purpose to portray Hitler as a hero? No. And who am I to call Hitler a hero? Do you know that Hitler's own nephew never married or had any children because he wanted the Hitler lineage to end in this world? So if Hitler's own family does not want any other Hitler to be born in this world, then who am I to glorify Hitler? And as I said before, and I repeat once again, the one who wins the war writes history, and the one who writes history always portrays himself as the hero. And to show someone as a hero, you need a villain in the story. Otherwise, how will the hero look great?